Good morning. Welcome to the Community Unitarian Universalist Congregation at White Plains. I'm Reverend Paul Langston-Daley, and along with Reverend Kimberly, Tracy, and Reverend Deb, I am one of the team working with you all this year in your transition. CUUC is a member of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregation, and love lies at the center of our faith. We covenant to collectively transform and to grow spiritually and ethically as we adapt to the changing world. In this congregation, we affirm that Black lives matter as we embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great interdependent web of life. We're glad you're here this morning, and if you're visiting us online, please take a moment to click the link in the chat and fill out the visitor form to let us know how you'd like to be connected with this community. If you're visiting in person, we invite you to stop by the welcome table and say hello. Welcome. Let us begin. Chimananda Ngozi Adichie writes, "When we reject the single story, when we realize that there is never a single story about any place, we regain a kind of paradise." As we gather this morning, we take time to reflect on what it means to know our stories in their fullness. We undertake the task of claiming our fullest self, that we may truly begin to live into the call of love, that to love our neighbors and to love ourselves. We light our chalice this morning as an affirmation that in this community of care and love, we honor this journey and support one another in our becoming.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 389 in your gray hymnal. We're going to sing it 3 times through in unison. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near.
Our theme this month is storytelling. We're thinking about the stories that shape our lives, stories we know or think we know about ourselves, our families, our communities, country, even this place. What is the story of the community that gathers here? Did you know that there are 2 fascinating books about the history of CUUC? So interesting to read. And this morning, I'm pulling some information from the first one by Charles Selinsky. I also received wonderful stories and photos from several of you. In all, I had about 16 hours of material. So this will be our story, part 1. If you don't hear what you sent me, stay tuned. I want to acknowledge that stories and photos stir nostalgia, as well as difficult memories. Storytelling is about understanding whence we come, so those stories can move us forward into new stories. So, part 1. The origins of this congregation go back to, does anybody know? 1907, very close. When a few parents formed a Sunday school to meet in their homes on Myrtle Street. 8 children attended. The church was founded in 1909, undenominational, to unite for the purpose of worship those seeking for truth who find their religious needs unsatisfied elsewhere. By January 1910, a statement was adopted by the congregation and inscribed in a parish book. The statement read in part, "The name of this church is All Souls Church of White Plains, New York. Its purpose is to help its members to widen and deepen their knowledge and experience of religion and to uphold them in an effort to live according to their individual beliefs, making a wise service of their fellows the witness of their sincerity." The form of government is congregational. The detailed management of its affairs is entrusted to a standing committee of 4 men and 4 women elected at an annual meeting held in April. It was noted that a person of color or woman would not be elected board chair for another 43 years. Dr. Errol Collimore, an African-American member, served in the position in 1952. Then Helen Vestlage served 3 times, from 1954 to 1957. On April 16, 1910, the parish book was opened for the first time, and 18 members became the first members of the congregation. At that time, White Plains was a village with a population of about 15,000, and the founders felt that White Plains, being the county seat, would grow in population, and many families would come who were unchurched or Unitarians looking for a liberal group. The photos up here, the black and white photos, are from the first volume. By 1913, the congregation had grown enough to incorporate, and by October 1914, the church had bylaws. The chairman, Joseph Allen, was authorized to execute an agreement with the American Unitarian Association of Boston to secure the use of a lot to build a church in White Plains. Within a few months, the American Unitarian Association purchased a lot on the northwest corner of Maple and Longwood for $5,000. It was 8 years before the congregation would meet in the building while they sorted out financing, affiliation, and governance. During those 8 years, the group moved worship service from their homes to a series of rented quarters. The first service at the Maple Avenue Church was held outdoors on October 9, 1921, as the structure wasn't quite ready for indoor activity. A wise service of their fellows from the 1910 statement was a pledge and purpose to involve the community, which meant an evolution into a new kind of church. It was John Haynes Holmes, a Unitarian minister and frequent speaker, who introduced the concept of a community church, 1910. For most, the thinking of Holmes pointed to a new direction. The building was to be used for the community, and in May 1919, the congregation unanimously voted to call the new building the White Plains Meeting House. A year later, the congregation voted again, changing the name from All Souls Church to White Plains Community Church. In 1923, Superintendent Davis presented a new model for Sunday school, noting that the term Sunday school suggests merely instruction, whereas our purpose is more than intellectual. Our aim is participation. The term children's church replaced Sunday school, and they established a custom by which children stay during the opening part of the Sunday morning worship and participate in activities of the church and community. In the spring of 1925, the Spirit of Truth lectern was donated to the congregation as a memorial to Mrs. Isabel Levy, a young mother from the congregation who had died. In those early years, the music committee sponsored afternoon concerts on the first Sunday of each month, chamber music, singers, solo instruments, and choral pieces. These continued until 1931, when they were stopped because of the popularity of Sunday radio concerts that had led to dwindling attendance. The congregation was committed to social responsibility, and in 1927, the board voted to donate one Sunday collection per month to some worthy cause. The 1930s saw hard times in the nation and in this community. The budget and membership declined significantly. By 1936, it had dropped to 30, and the congregation debated closing the Sunday school. By 1939, there was only a junior discussion group that met twice a month. 17 members attended the 1937 annual conference meeting, and the congregation had $14.42 in the bank. By 1949, conditions and the spirit of the church were improving. They had survived those 14 lean and uncertain years. Reverend Clifford Vesey served as minister from 1942 to 1964, and in his 22 years, membership grew, our re-enrollment grew, the budget increased from nearly $4,000 to $71,000, and the new congregation moved into a spacious new building off of North Street. It was during this time in 1943, the hymn Spirit of Truth was written by member Edna Butoff of the church. It was still sung regularly more than 6 decades later. The name Spirit of Truth was given as it complemented the name of the lectern. To accommodate an ever-rising church and Sunday school attendance, in the spring of 1955, the board appointed a planning committee to consider long-range physical plant requirements. On Sunday, March 23rd, 1958, Mrs. Bertha Harker, a charter member of the church, broke ground at Rosedale Avenue with a golden spade. This building was dedicated a little over 1 year later in May 1959, and there is a whole other volume that I will save for part 2. At this point, let's shift from people and building to place. The pictures you'll see and information come from Cynthia Roberts, Bice Wilson, Tim Lynch, Norm Handelman, Joe Majax, Cynthia Roberts, and Daniel Tillman. Some of the photos and videos are from 2 trail cameras that we have placed around the property. Let's begin by acknowledging that this land was once cared for by the Lenape Nation, especially the Munsee Lenape. My Thanksgiving 2020 Wisdom Story talked more about that, and we'll be happy to share that so you could see it again if you like. For the sake of time, now we'll turn to how we are caring for this land. This property of more than 8 acres includes 25,000 square foot building, a separate parsonage, and approximately 150 off-street parking spaces. Approximately 30% of the site is developed and with buildings in paved areas. The balance includes wetlands, wooded areas, steep terrain, and our building is prominently sited at the edge of a plateau. This land is a wildlife sanctuary, one of the last in White Plains. It is a refuge for all kinds of beings, mammals, amphibians, birds, fish, trees, and many types of plants. It is also a refuge for us, people who come here to find community, inspiration, and spirit. Our placekeeping practice opens our hearts and minds to new relationships with all forms of life, and we pursue the wisdom to understand the actions we can take to benefit all. In the placekeeping program that is part of our religious exploration ministry, our placekeepers include 3 groups: water keepers, animal keepers, and earth keepers. And there are a couple in the room. Theo, are you an animal, earth, or water keeper? All of them? Yeah. Water keepers are responsible for understanding and representing all of our watery places and all the life forms who occupy them. Here at CUUC, we are at the headwaters, the uplands of Mamaroneck River watershed, which flows into the Long Island Sound estuary, which flows into New York Harbor and then into the Atlantic. The water that falls on our sanctuary without walls collects in the stream that is born on our wetlands. Like 70% of White Plains, it contributes to the Mamaroneck River watershed. Mamaroneck is plagued by regular flooding. Some of the water in the picture that you see is our water. We are responsible for all the water that falls here, making sure it doesn't contribute to flooding and that it stays clean and safe, supporting life here and all the way to the Atlantic. Animal keepers are our ambassadors to the four-legged and winged ones, the creepy crawlies and slithering ones, mammals, birds, insects, and reptiles. We have many animals who live here who might surprise you. Foxes, opossums, raccoons, moles and voles, groundhogs, deer, coyotes, and more. A couple of those pictures are from, did you get? Nice, thank you. Earth keepers are responsible for this land and for the one-legged, our tree and plant neighbors. Every plant and tree around us is here because of long migration, an evolutionary process, an ancient history that adds up to the wetlands we see today. These life forms have been under great change. 100 years ago, there were very few big trees in this region. They had all been cut down. Everything we have here now is second growth forest. You are all invited to care for this beautiful land that we occupy. Placekeeping in RE is one of our core multi-generational activities. There are often as many adults participating as there are children and youth. This morning, our placekeepers will walk the land, looking for and discussing possible places of focus for observation, citizen science, and place art over the year. They'll visit 4 or 5 observation points, be introduced to how we can observe different things in those plots over the coming years, and discuss what we might start this year as we also continue the water study that we do each spring. As we sing our next hymn, I invite our placekeepers of all ages to head outside, and the 7th to 9th grade youth head to your coming of age class.
Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 115, God of Grace and God of Glory. God of grace and God of glory, on thy people pour thy power, crown thine ancient church's story, bring its bud to glorious flower. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage, for the facing of this hour, for the facing of this hour. Blow the clouds of evil round us, hide thy brightness from our gaze, from the fears that long have bound us, free our hearts to faith and praise. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage, for the living of these days, for the living of these days. Cure thy children's warring madness, and our pride to thy control. Shame our wanton selfish gladness, rich in things and poor in soul. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage, make thy praise the daily call. Make thy praise our as one beyond division in the struggle to be free. Grant us wisdom, grant us courage, ears to hear and eyes to see. Ears to hear and eyes to see.
Our first reading this morning is from Living Resistance, an Indigenous Vision for Seeking Wholeness Every Day by Caitlin Curtis. History is personal, communal, and ancestral. Throughout history, we have heard stories of resistance, of betrayal, of friendship. We've been both encouraged and confused by the actions of our ancestors. We have wondered who they were in their own day, how they did or did not resist the status quo of hate, apathy, or injustice that surrounded them. Inherently, history is both what our ancestors lived and the current making of history in our lives today, which means that we are both the result of our ancestors and on the journey of becoming ancestors ourselves. History is the in-between space we inhabit, right at this very moment. What a heavy, sacred thing, right? Through an ancestral lens, resistance means telling the truth and understanding my ancestors as human beings with trauma and stories, all while understanding that they are held accountable to those actions through my own life. Facing history means facing them in all their humanity and facing my own in the same way. Facing history is also about remembering that one day I will be an ancestor, and the truth should keep me tethered to embodying resistance when and where I can. This should be something that guides all of us and reminds us daily that our actions, words, and embodiments have ripple effects into the generations who come after us.
Please join me in a responsive reading by reading along with the words in bold type. New life comes to us as a gift. Each new life makes its demand, exacts our attentiveness, enlists and organizes our energies, and blesses us. May we be worthy of the gift and glad receivers of the blessing. New life appeals to us. Each new life is helpless and so calls forth our help, is weak and so calls forth our strength, is innocent and so calls forth our wisdom. May we be wise in our strength and ever strong in our help. Life grows. Each new life ventures first words, first steps, first essays in the art of living. Each grows, ever surpassing the life that was for the life that shall be. May we patiently wait and watch in wonder. New life bears untold promise. Each new life has a story to tell, and we shall listen. Each new life goes forth from us, laying the child's sovereign claim on whole realms of being we had called our own. Spirit of love and grace, may we all be blessed, whatever the pathways we follow, whatever the life we claim as our own.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing in storm. quenching my tears through all my years, singing.
Our stories, sometimes said aloud and known, and sometimes remain silent, can offer understanding of who we are today and how we want to be in the future. For me, a new book titled Two Roads Home: Hitler, Stalin, and the Miraculous Survival of My Family is written by Daniel Finkelstein, a first cousin of my former husband. It offers tremendous insight into the untold story of German and Polish Jews, specifically our family. The harrowing narrative has given me the chills, brought me to tears, and has made me stop in my tracks. These stories, though not of my own blood relatives, are similar to my own family. Indeed, they are the stories of my children's family. Facing our stories, knowing they will be history someday, gives me pause to think. What can I learn from their previously untold stories? Courage, destiny, the importance of faith and belief? What can I tell my children about my own story that will help guide them as they live their own lives? Whether individually or collectively as a congregation, our history is our future, and together we write the story for those yet to be born.
How many of you have ever attended a Unitarian Universalist memorial service? So if you've been to one of our services, then you are probably aware that we have a time in those services when we invite people to come forward and share a bit about the person who has died. To share a little bit of a perspective, a story, a memory, some little bit that maybe no one else knew about. We often learn new things, sometimes unexpected things, about their lives of which we were simply unaware. It's an amazing thing to see a person in all of their facets and complexity and beauty. And memorial services are one of the few places where we get to experience that kind of opening and expansion of awareness and knowledge of our fellow travelers on this earth. Whether it's information the person held close in life, petty or deeply generous behavior that is kept in silence, we don't share our whole selves with everyone, except a few rare intimate relationships. We use our experience and our judgment to help us discern when and where to share in different settings. Through our experience of shame, sometimes through an experience of family, sometimes through a mentor or peer who helped guide us, and always through a culture that favors and preferences white, cisgender, able-bodied experiences as primary. There are always places we must select and trim and modify how we tell our stories. This morning we heard from Tracy about this land, about this congregation. She told me she told you she had 16 hours worth of material. Yesterday she told me she had 2. But she had a limited time to share all that information. And each time we come up to preach, those of us who do this for a living, we have to discern, what can I tell you in 15 minutes that you can take with you in the course of your week that will be useful for you? Which means I will absolutely have to leave something out every time. Seeking a coherent sense of flow and meaning is my goal. Not getting all the details right, not making sure that everything is packed into the sermon. I used to preach for 25 minutes. I've learned over the years that I don't have to try to pack everything into a single sermon, that I can spread it out over time. The process of telling our stories is always filtered because of time, because of levels of intimacy, because of our own sense of vulnerability, and the parts we leave out of our stories also mean something. So I want to tell you a story of my name that for many, many years, I didn't tell anyone. In fact, I buried it so deeply that I almost forgot it myself. But I was never quite fully able to forget it completely. And I tell it as an illustration of how our stories shape us and our relationships with other people. The experience created a sense of resilience in me, but it also caused me to experience deep shame for many years. Self-reflection, good therapy, and excellent friendships alleviated much of that shame and allowed me to move into new places. I'm grateful, though I wish I didn't have to go through all that. And I certainly hope that no child will ever have to do what I did. I tell the story today because the thing that's important about it is I left the story about my name out of my life for decades. I was born in rural Massachusetts in a small liberal community of less than 3,000 people. In the 1970s, the primary school that I went to was an open format plan. It was sort of all the rage in the 70s, right? It was one of the first in the nation. And the library stood at the center of the school, and the rooms were all kind of around the outside edge, sort of wedge-shaped. We had friends in all grades, and we mingled between the grades, and they encouraged that. And I recall a time in third grade when we were in the gym and we were running around and we were burning off our significant youthful energy. And I remember it being hot and humid and kind of gross. And I noticed that the boys had taken their shirts off and were running around the gym without shirts. I remember going to the gym teacher, an older woman. Even then, she was older. And she wore a button that said 69 cents. Anybody know what that means? So in the 1970s, women made 69 cents for every dollar that a man made. This was my gym teacher wearing this during school hours. I suspect if somebody tried to do that in Florida right now, they'd lose their job. So she was a strong feminist and definitely a proud and strong woman. And I asked her, the boys have their shirts off. It's hot in here. Can I take my shirt off? And she said, yes, go right ahead. So I did. And I ran around the gym for the rest of our gym class. And I don't remember much after that. Until several months later, I have another recollection, this time talking to several of my teachers. The gym teacher was included. I remember going up to them and very excitedly asking them to call me Paul. And I remember the way in which their faces crumpled in shock and horror. They were not prepared for what I was telling them, and it showed all over their faces. They recovered quickly and laughed nervously and sent me away. And I remember that moment. And I remembered that moment for decades afterwards. It was all about fitting in and understanding how to be a chameleon, to meet the needs of the people around me, and to ignore my own needs. I hid part of myself, even to myself, denying my fullness, the breadth and depth of who I am, what I have to offer this world, and how I can be in it. The shame I experienced was like a blanket that kept others out, holding myself close to protect and shelter myself. It limited my capacity for relationships for years. And now, this is part of my story that I tell proudly. Because since my coming out and my transition, I have learned what it means to actually belong, not just fit in. What it means to let go of fitting in and to find those people and places who hold me and care for me and love me. People who gently rock me when I'm feeling low and full of sorrow, who provide me with their strength and courage on the days when I have none. This is what it means to belong. And no one can belong until we can tell our story in all of its fullness. Nikki noted, these stories are not of my blood relatives, but they're similar to my own family. Indeed, they are the story of my children's family. New life appeals to us. Now, this doesn't mean that we share the intimate details of our story with everyone. That would be inappropriate. But it does mean that we have to find people and places where we can allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to share the deeper parts of our lives, to reflect and grow, sometimes together. Part of what is wonderful about storytelling is that it is an illustration of the human condition. My story may not be exactly your story, and in fact, I'm pretty sure it's not for most of you. But I suspect that some of you have had similar experiences of people reacting in ways that were unsupportive, or having to find places to share your stories where that sense of shame was alleviated. And I think it's also important to remember that we don't just share experiences and our stories as individuals, but we also experience them as communities. There are congregations in our association that have significant histories of conflict and misconduct, and congregations that choose to hide those stories. And so when visitors and newcomers come in, they can feel it in the woodwork. Something's different here, something's not right, something feels off. And yet no one talks about what's going on. I also know of congregations that focus on what's missing, what they've lost, how much scarcity they experience. And you can also feel that in the woodwork, that sense of there's not enough. As she was preparing for the service today, Tracy noted, it's so interesting to see how the past still lives in the present and frames the future. Indeed, whether we acknowledge this truth or not, it is in fact a reality. Curtis writes, inherently, history is both what our ancestors lived and the current making of history in our lives today, which means that we are both the result of our ancestors and on the journey of becoming ancestors ourselves. History is the in-between space we inhabit at this very moment. What a heavy, sacred thing, right? I often think of my own history as sort of a corkscrew, right? Reliving similar kinds of experiences, not exactly the same, sometimes degrees better, but repeating nonetheless. I see that same pattern in congregations and communities and in our national and international history. Those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it is an oft-shared aphorism for a reason. And so it behooves us to find ways to come to terms with the parts of our history, be it personal, communal, national, parts that are sometimes hard to own and hard to share. Because when we do own them and share them, when we move through the pain and the shame of our experiences with another human being, when we look at our mistakes and reflect on them, we have the opportunity to learn from those experiences and twist that corkscrew out to ever widening circles, repeating less and less as the information is integrated and learned. New life grows. This place, this congregation feels welcoming. It feels warm. It's clear to me that religious education here is not just important, but centered. The music is thoughtful and inclusive. The building, a bit odd, you know. But I grew up in the 70s and I get it, right? Like, you know, it's a product of its time. And it's beautiful. And it's big enough to accommodate your needs, which so many of our churches and congregations don't have. The grounds indicate that the natural world is valued here, and it's clear that people are welcome to explore the trails and the woods. I saw the Black Lives Matter sign and the queer banner hidden out here behind the trees in front, which could be interpreted by visitors as a sign of ambivalence on the part of the congregation. Just being truthful. And overall, the story I see when I walk in is one of welcoming and vibrance and beauty and care. The stories we share and how we share them matter. They shape who we become and how we are becoming each and every day. Nikki asks important questions, modified here to go beyond the individual experience. What can be learned from previous untold stories? Courage, destiny, the importance of faith and belief. What can we tell our children about our story that will help guide them as they live their lives? And Caitlin Curtis reminds us, facing history is also about remembering that one day I will be an ancestor. This should be something that guides all of us and reminds us daily that our actions, words, and embodiments have ripple effects into the generations who come after us. If you have stories you have kept in the harbor of your heart or the corner of your mind, they aren't inherently bad. But if those hidden stories are causing you pain and shame, separation, silence, fear, or any of a number of adaptive responses that no longer work, that maintain separation from others, it might be time to find a therapist, a friend, a community of care in which you can explore appropriately, learn, integrate, and let go. And if, as Tracy noted, the past still lives in the present and frames the future, then knowing the history will allow you to shape your future, as well as being shaped by it. With intention and vision, you can bring others along, learning and growing together with curiosity, wonder, and joyful exuberance. New life bears untold promise. Spirit of love and grace, may we all be blessed, whatever the pathways we follow, whatever the life we claim as our own. May our stories be honored and held in the manner that recognizes their sacred and holy nature. May our growth be steady and strong. May we always remember the importance of our stories. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.
Good morning. Let us enter into a time of prayerful reflection. Our colleague David Miller, who serves the UU congregation of Fairfax, Virginia, wrote this as a statement for his congregation. I share it here today as well, knowing we are in solidarity with one another in this continuing and challenging story, remembering that one day we too will be ancestors. Reverend Miller writes, our hearts, so often broken by our inhumanity toward each other, already so bruised by the unnecessary brutality of dictators and our own internal conflicts, is now again still added the pain and sorrow of those so brutally damaged in the Middle East by those whose ongoing differences breed such endless and senseless destruction. To assume any clear answer feels foolish. To give up hope feels tempting. To tremble in the midst of horror feels completely understandable. To stop trying to birth love in the world feels unacceptable. May love hold us, embrace us, fill us, and expand outward from us all of our days. I'd also like to lift up today over 2,000 people who died in the earthquake in Afghanistan. May the spirit of resilience be with them and give them what they need. May the spirit of courage and wisdom be with us all to help us each day. For these and all concerns and joys that we hold in our hearts, let us spend a moment in silent reflection.
In this faith, we engage generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope, and we covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. For all that we do within these walls and beyond these walls to further this vision, your generosity in all of the ways it is expressed is deeply appreciated.
Good morning. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, Stephen Sondheim's musical Sunday in the Park with George tells the backstory of the creation of the French pointillist painter George Seurat's masterpiece, A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte. In the first act, a fantasy unfolds about the various personas immortalized on the canvas, their relationships, their intrigues, their connections to the painter. In the end, one is left with the realization that posterity's perception of historical truth is in the hands of the artist, who arranges what he sees into a perfect design with order, tension, and ultimately with harmony. The lyrics tell us, "Let us pass through our perfect park, pausing on a Sunday by the cool, blue, triangular water, as we pass through arrangements of shadows towards the verticals of trees, forever, forever." In Seurat's world, the water will forever be purple, yellow, red. The grass, a green, orange, violet mass. His art becomes his and our immortal truth forever.
Please rise in body or spirit for our final hymn, number 128. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give. We come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. I didn't know we were skipping the second verse. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. We sing our thanks and praise, for all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
You can be seated for the closing words, the benediction, that's fine. As always, I share these words from Octavia Butler. She writes, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change." Blessed be.
Good morning. Yes, I'll get up here. My name is Patricia Gettle. I'm one of the auction team. I've been told that we've had some extra galactic space chatter picked up by our coming-of-age chalice in the RE lobby. A friendly alien spacecraft will be landing in our sanctuary just in time for our annual auction, Among the Stars, Saturday evening, November 18th. We're planning a big evening to welcome them and could use some mission specialists to help with the event. No experience necessary, all hands are welcome. We need donated items. We need help preparing appetizers and desserts, donating dinners, decorating our space, tending to the bar, to name a few of the tasks ahead. Did I mention we need donations? Check the flyer. You'll see these everywhere. You probably got one in the mail for ideas and details. We're also collecting loose change to turn into SpaceX tickets for someplace unimaginable. Tickets include an open bar, appetizers, not freeze-dried, I'm told, dinner, dessert, free childcare if reserved in advance, and a full evening of fun. The bid and board bump is a sight to behold. There are silent auction items, live auction items, a paper bag auction. Please make sure to reserve your spot by November 12th and visit our table in the hall afterwards to sign up or ask questions. And to quote Reverend Paul, it will be an evening of joyful exuberance. I hope you'll be there. Thank you.
Today is our next Odyssey program. Longtime CUUC member Barbara Dodds will share the story of her life's journey. Coffee is available right now in Fellowship Hall, and we invite those attending the Odyssey to grab a quick cup and return here to the sanctuary where the Odyssey starts shortly. Birthday cake for Barbara will be offered at the conclusion of the program. Those online may stay in this same Zoom space. We will not be hosting an online coffee hour this morning. We ask parents and caregivers to pick up children in 3rd grade and younger before coffee, unless you have already arranged for childcare with Diane. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, please join us online for a congregation forum with Rev Paul called Communicating Our Story. We will explore our congregational stories and share what is most vital to us at CUUC. Rev Paul will be leading a different forum each month throughout this transition year. The Ministerial Search Committee has extended the deadline for their survey and asks everyone to please respond if you haven't already. There will be members of the committee in Fellowship Hall today to help you get started. Friday, we welcome everyone to our community dance party starting at 6 p.m. in Fellowship Hall. Terry Kung can tell you more. She's over there. Next Sunday, our Board of Trustees will host an open house after coffee hour. When you leave the building today, please remember to place your name tag in the white basket in the lobby. A reminder that our entrance doors now have new keys. A spare key is available in the outside lockbox. You can contact the office for the code. Okay, admit it. How many people have keys? Old keys. Old keys, yeah. Those are now gone, and there's now a lockbox. Our weekly e-communitarian and RE newsletters offer details for these and more opportunities to connect and nurture this community that is so dear to us. For our postlude, may we remember that every composer has a story to tell us as well. At the turn of the 20th century, the mainstream musical establishment would have tried to tell a different story and hidden from history the genius of composers of African descent, such as Scott Joplin. Let us hold in our hearts the blessing of their perseverance to create and enchant us to this day with ragtime, blues, and jazz, our nation's signature sounds, as we listen to Adam play The Easy Winners.